I would expect that it has more to do with securing the internal order of the United States. Viktor Orban has done something like this. I don't remember exactly when. It's got to be like 2 or 3 years ago, because he was worried that he might be overthrown. And so he had to conduct a purge of his military. I think he sacked something like 200 generals or something quite radical. And I think that this might be something along those lines. You know, you wouldn't have to do that if you were going to war. You would just go to war. I don't see the necessity of doing such an unprecedented gathering. I think it's more to maybe prepare and warn about possible, I don't know, color revolutions, uprisings, coups.
You're watching CapitalCOSM. My name is Danny. It is September 25th, 2025, and my guest today is none other than Alex Krainer. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend.
Thank you for the invite, Danny. Always good to join you.
Yeah, likewise, Alex. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So many things happening around the world. You just had the UN General Assembly. Couple big days just passed by. A huge security event. You had Donald Trump speak at the UN. You have all of these mysterious back and forths about Ukraine and Russia. Is Donald Trump backtracking on peace between Russia and Ukraine, or just part of some plan? We can talk about that. But what's on your radar screen right now, Alex? I mean, where do you want to start?
It's hard to say. Let's say that over the last few days, Trump has really thrown a couple of curveballs that are hard to explain. And I think that since his state visit to the United Kingdom, he's done a few things that really kind of don't add up to my mind. The one that kind of confuses me the most is his demand for Afghanistan to give back the Bagram air base to the United States, which is really truly bizarre, because in his first term in 2017, he himself wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan completely.
Is that connected to the defense pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia?
No, I think this precedes it. I'm not sure. Maybe.
Yeah, because I spoke to Martin Armstrong a couple of days ago about this, and what he told me was that it was a response to that defense pact between Saudi and Pakistan, and so they needed to, and they were afraid that in the event of a war between Iran and Israel, they would need that airspace in Saudi Arabia, and they weren't sure if Saudi Arabia was going to allow them to use that airspace. So now they need that Air Force base back in Bagram as an insurance policy.
That's possible. I think that Martin Armstrong's explanation makes sense. My own thinking was that this happened almost immediately after he had his state visit in the UK. And one thing that I remember from 2021, when the United States withdrew from Afghanistan in August, that the British were extremely vexed about that. And I was kind of taken aback, because I went with the narrative that the United Kingdom is always this junior partner that, out of a sense of loyalty, follows along with the United States on all these imperial misadventures around the world. And so when the United States withdrew, I thought, surely they would be relieved to be out of that quagmire. But they were hysterical about it. And while in the United States, the discourse was focused on the way the withdrawal was conducted, it was largely bungled and it didn't go smoothly, and some soldiers were killed, and there was concern for a lot of the Afghans who collaborated with the American occupation, American troops and people there. In the UK, there was a whole series of speeches in the parliament and in the media that were practically insulting the United States for cutting and running, and I was really surprised by that, and that kind of led me into the whole, looking a bit closer into the role of Britain in all these crisis spots around the world. And so I was wondering if maybe while he was in Britain, meeting with King Charles and Keir Starmer's government and everyone, that that wasn't a request from the United Kingdom to retake the Bagram Air Base. And I think it also makes sense that because Bagram is there, not too far from China, it's not too far from Pakistan. It would be a good spot from which to monitor if Pakistanis launched any missiles in the direction of Iran and potentially shooting them down early in their trajectory. So all of that makes sense, but it's strange for Trump himself to make that request. And I don't know right now whether he made that request kind of to make a public statement about it and then maybe forget about it, or is he going to insist on this and pursue it, which could lead to a conflict again, because the Taliban said, no way, no how. So that's problematic. Then we have also the situation around Venezuela, which to my mind is not that difficult to explain, because Venezuela is the country with the world's largest declared reserves of crude oil, of oil reserves, which obviously would be a target for Wall Street, because if the United States took control of the government in Caracas, then obviously again it would be American corporations that would get preferential deals to develop those deposits and extract that oil, which would predominantly benefit Wall Street banks, because they would be the one funding all that and turning all that oil into their own collateral. So it's easy to explain where that pressure comes from. And it's not new either, because on Trump's watch the last time around in 2019, we had an attempt to stage a coup in Venezuela when, Juan Guaido, the CIA boy, declared himself president of Venezuela, and then Trump and everybody else officially recognized him as the legitimate president of Venezuela. But it didn't seem to me that Trump had his heart in it. And back at that time, they were talking about oil. You had John Bolton, who came out and said, it would be great for the American economy if we could take control of that oil. But Trump made the right noises about it. I mean, right from the point of view of the American ruling establishment. But then he kind of turned over the whole project to his biggest two flunkies in the administration, being John Bolton, whom he called the dumbest man he's ever met, right? And Elliot Abrams, the big loser from the Iran-Contra affair. So, I thought, well, if you really wanted to change the regime in Venezuela, you wouldn't task it to these two guys, but he did. So I thought, he's not meaning it. And, in fact, nothing happened. Juan Guaido never became president. Maduro remained in power. And that was the end of it. Now they're back at it again, only they're not talking about oil, they're talking about drugs, and they're blowing up boats in the waters, in the international waters off of Venezuela, which is problematic on all kinds of counts, because first of all, it's probably a breach of international law. Secondly, because you're conducting extrajudicious killings of people who you claim you know who they are and what they're up to, but we're supposed to take your word for it. Wouldn't, if you were really fighting the drugs war, wouldn't you try to intercept their boat and take the cargo as evidence, and then apprehend these people in order to question them, to find out who they are, who they work for, what the deal is, what the logistics are of this drugs operation, if it was a drugs operation? But they're just blowing them up and showing videos for show.
What would be the point in doing so?
I can't imagine it serving any other purpose than distraction. What purpose does it serve? Even if these are drug cartels, drug cartels have turnover. They're not going to run out of people who are going to be willing to risk running drugs across the sea to wherever they go, probably the United States. Yeah, I mean, not that the boat is going to cut straight across to the United States, but they're going to go to wherever, Trinidad and Tobago, or some Caribbean island, or some secret private island, Puerto Rico. I don't know. If the drugs trade was really the target, my top list of targets would be, first of all, the banking establishment that launders the money, because all of these drugs are sold for cash. They're not you don't pay by credit card or bank transfer for these drugs. You pay in cash. And let's say the Mexican drug cartels generate about $400 million in revenues per week. It's a massive amount of money, and you can't even conduct any business unless this money is laundered and deposited clean into the accounts of these drug cartels. If you have cash, what can you do with it? You can buy a few fancy cars, you can pay, you can buy houses and champagne and caviar and prostitutes, but you're not going to spend $400 million a week on that stuff. You have to store it somewhere. You have to pay people to guard it. These people can become a threat to you. They can turn against you and take that money. So if the drug trades was limited to cash transactions, all these cartels would splinter into 1,000 rival groups almost instantly. So you need the banking sector to clean that up, to anoint, because somebody will have signature on these accounts, and the bank will then decide, okay, you, sir, Mr. Guzman, or whoever, have this money at your disposal. You're the boss. You're the chief of this cartel. And then nobody else has access to that money other than the person that the bank recognizes as the rightful owner of the account. And so this is how you would eliminate the drug cartels, by preventing money laundering, by busting the money laundering banks. The second target for me would be Ecuador, because I think that currently some 60% of all drug trade towards the United States goes through Ecuador. And it's problematic because Ecuador is an ally of the United States. And then the third target would be Canada, because Canada is not cocaine, but fentanyl and all this kind of stuff is largely coming, or predominantly coming, from Canada, and is being, China provides the precursor materials, chemicals, but they're being converted in these massive drugs labs that are in Canada along the US border. And so Venezuela would, if drugs trade was the issue, Venezuela would be actually a low priority target. So it seems to me that maybe this is an attempt to just perhaps distract the public, or maybe it's an attempt to make a show of force to signal to the Venezuelan opposition that, hey, we're right here. If you try to overthrow Maduro, we'll come in and help you. After the coup in 2019, there's been practically no diplomatic contacts between the United States and Venezuela for a time, for I think about 3 years. And then when the war in Ukraine started in 2022, then the Biden administration thought, okay, so we're going to sanction Russia. We need to talk to Venezuelans to make sure that we have alternative sources of crude oil. The United States does have crude oil production, very large one, but it's largely from fracking, which means that you don't have the heavy components of the oil. You can't make jet fuel for aircraft. You can't make diesel from that oil. So you need heavy oil, which Venezuela has in large abundance. So Biden sent a delegation to Caracas, I think, in 2022. And they came away with let's say, some positive statements, but non-specific. They didn't say exactly what the agreement was, but the Maduro government was saying, like, yeah, we discussed things that are of mutual interest and blah, 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 blah. And so, given that under Biden, the illegal migration took colossal proportions, I wouldn't be surprised if part of that deal was that they encouraged the Venezuelans to start sending all of their undesirables northward towards the United States, because apparently they've been sending gang members, prison inmates, people from loony asylums, people with mental health issues like that. So that might be one of the problems that Trump administration has with the Venezuelan government, and probably want to stop and reverse that flow. But the drugs trade doesn't make any sense at all. Mm-hmm. Only this, the problem of migrations and maybe oil, and some kind of a feeble attempt to try to encourage Venezuelan opposition to rise up and overthrow Maduro, which it's not going to happen because they already tried it in 2019. It didn't work. Between 2019 and today, if anything, the Venezuelan government would have doubly secured themselves against color revolutions and coups.
Yeah, Venezuela is very interesting because, number one, it's in the Western Hemisphere. And if you recall, at the start of the Trump 2 administration, the Monroe Doctrine was a key piece of the foreign policy put forth, that we were going to focus on the Western Hemisphere, all that stuff in the Eastern Hemisphere, in Europe, in the Middle East. We'll solve that and just focus on our problem here. But with Venezuela, it is in the Western Hemisphere. But do you think that there's also a deeper concern alive that China or Russia or Iran could use Venezuela as an outpost? And now, in addition to Venezuela, you have the likes of Brazil having you have this major BRICS presence in the Western Hemisphere as well. So, that could potentially be another hotspot right there, is Brazil too. So is this a way of cleaning out making sure that Fortress America is clear from top to bottom by taking care of Venezuela and taking care of some of these BRICS allied countries within South America?
Yeah, I think that the battle is between making Venezuela again a colony of the United States. Effectively, it's not going to be declared a colony, but let's call it, put him into a colonial subjugation to the United States, to the regional hegemon, and from Russia and China's point of view, it would be much more favorable to them to keep Venezuela as it is, and to draw Venezuela into these multipolar integrations and the BRICS group eventually. I think that we're not talking about Trumps. We have to part with this illusion that Trump is not an emperor. He's the president of the United States. He can't just walk into the White House and snap his fingers and everything is going to be as he says. Trump is the head of the executive branch of the government, but then you also have the US Congress, where Trump only has a very slim majority, and that slim majority is not particularly loyal to him. The entrenched interests that are still the dominant ruling establishment in the United States are exactly the interests that have been privileged and successful under this post-World War II global order, where the United States pretty much assumed the role of the enforcement of the empire. And so people who benefited the most from that arrangement want that arrangement preserved. And for sure, they're exerting huge pressure on the administration to continue this. And I don't know to what extent Trump can resist them, particularly not in his own hemisphere. So I imagine that he has to go along with this to some extent. But one way to go along with it, if you don't have your heart in it, is to do a crap job of it, as he did in 2019. Venezuela, Juan Guaido is the president. Here, John Bolton and Elliot Abrams, you guys take care of that. LOL, it's not going to happen. So it's very hard to say, Trump doesn't control the Congress. I've heard him on several occasions say, in discussion of this and that, policy initiatives, to say, yeah, that's nice, but we don't have 60 votes in the Senate, so it's not going anywhere. So I think that his top priority fight is still on the domestic political arena. And I think that the key moment for this will be the midterm elections next year. And then if he gets his 60 votes in the Senate and he preserves the majority in the Congress or extends it, I think that only then will we get the full measure of Trump, where he stands and what the direction is. For the moment, I think that he's choosing his battles, and credit where credit is due, he has reestablished positive, constructive relations with the Russians, which is far and away the most important problem, because we were on the edge of a nuclear war. And I think that by him withdrawing from Ukraine and declining to issue a security guarantee to Ukraine, we've taken a giant step back from the precipice. And if the relations between Russia and the United States continue to develop along these constructive, cooperative lines, then all other things are eventually going to improve. But he's not going to be able to just pretend that pressures from Wall Street, pressures from the military-industrial complex, pressures from the Zionist lobby, and so forth are not there, and that he can just tell them, go away, that's not what we're doing, and that's that. So it's going to be all over the map a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, even if I was president or you were president, Alex, there'd be only so much you could do. Like you would have to capitulate on major issues.
Yeah, you would have to compromise on a lot of issues. You would have to really, really choose your battles wisely. And so far, I think that he's doing that. the thing that really throws up a doubt for me is this Bagram airbase thing. And I don't know what happened when he was in London. Was he had? Because I discussed this one. I don't know if it was on your podcast, but back in March when he started this Operation Rough Rider and he started bombing the Yemenis like nobody's ever seen before. That just seems so completely insane because they've been bombing the Yemenis since 2015, and then under Biden administration they launched this Operation Prosperity Guardian. Well, it was December 2023, and they've been bombing the Yemenis more.
Right.
And then the British and the Italians and the French joined in, and everybody was bombing the Yemenis. So what are you bombing the Yemenis for now? What's that going to change? It didn't change their mind then. It didn't stop them. So at that time, I thought like, okay, so either this is a diversion, this is a distraction, or maybe somehow they got to Trump. I don't know how, but we learned in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk assassination that his White House is overrun by Zionists, and some people say by the British assets. That Trump is genuinely afraid of being assassinated. So that could be part of the problem. Or it's enough that they threaten his family. He has children, he has grandchildren. They could tell him, you do as you say. It would be a shame if something happened to your kids or your grandchildren. We don't know exactly. And then there's also the possibility that he's pushing 80. He may not be as sharp as he once was, and that he's maybe losing his edge. Then there's also this division of labor hypothesis that has gained quite a lot of traction. I think Brian Berletich has pretty much originated that. And as although I follow Brian Berletich and have followed him for a long time since he was writing under pen name Tony Cardalucci, and I always thought very highly of him, but I have to say this division of labor hypothesis doesn't make sense to me, because the idea is that the United States is going to focus on China, leaving NATO, Europe and the UK to take care of Ukraine and Russia and the Middle East. That makes no sense at all to me. Conceivably, it's possible, but strategically it makes no sense at all, because the Europeans have no way to prevail against Russia. They have no way to even slow down Russia's progress. They can't, because the idea is like, you guys take care of Ukraine and freeze that conflict there, and we're going to be sequencing all these issues. We're going to take care of this, and then we're going to come back to this. Well, you're not going to freeze the conflict in Ukraine. So what sense does it make to leave it in the hands of the Europeans and the UK?
This video is brought to you by Upexi. UPXI on the NASDAQ, a publicly traded company that's making big waves in the crypto space. At the start of this year, Upexi announced its long-term strategy to shift focus into Bitcoin and crypto, and they've been executing in a major way. They recently closed a $100 million private placement, fueling the build-out of their Solana treasury operation. So as of September, Upexi holds over 2 million units of Solana, the largest Solana treasury of any public company, worth nearly $450 million, with an unrealized gain of about $142 million. And here's the kicker. Almost all of that Solana is being staked, generating around 8% in yield. That's about $105,000 per day in revenue. Since launching their treasury, UPXI adjusted Solana per share is up over 120%. UPXI has also made a strategic investment in Alpha Exchange, a next-gen trading platform powered by AI-driven insights, real-time analytics, and institutional-grade security. This gives UPXI not only exposure to the platform's growth, but a royalty interest in future revenues. And so with heavyweights like Arthur Hayes joining their new advisory committee, Upexi is positioning itself at the intersection of crypto, yield, and innovation. To learn more, check out Upexi, ticker symbol UPXI, and dive into their full investor deck at ir.upexi.com. All right, guys, let's get back to the video. But what if that's a feature, not a bug? What if the intent is to gut the European wealth and allow it to flow into the United States and other places like Dubai? Dubai is becoming, I mean, as you well know, Dubai is becoming a very well-known haven for European money as well. So what if the plan is to just gut Europe in the process and of a competitor?
That's a very credible idea. That's a very credible hypothesis. I think that is in fact being done. Europe is being gutted, and it's by design. The Nord Stream pipelines didn't blow themselves up. Somebody blew them up, and they went through a lot of trouble to do that. The result is, collapse of German industry, their industrial base. The result is that Britain and Germany have paid the highest energy prices in the world, so they are uncompetitive. And at the same time, the US is saying the door's wide open, come on over, and scooping up their top talent. And then, coercing the Europeans to make 650 billion investment in the United States, buy weapons from the United States, drain themselves, fighting and supporting Ukraine for as long as they can. That's all kind of collapsing Europe economically, politically, diplomatically, militarily, in every way. It's going to turn Europe into a colony, or the world's museum and tourist resort. So I think that is being done, and I think that it's not being done by accident. But that's a very different discourse than saying the Europeans are going to freeze the conflict in Ukraine while the United States takes care of business with China.
Yeah, and you heard about the memo that was leaked, right? About the French hospitals preparing for mass casualties, and apparently, according to Martin Armstrong, he said that it's not just isolated to France. I mean, that's pretty much European wide. Like that memo's gone out to Germany and every other European country out there as well.
I remember that memo, and I think that's the preparing people for war, because the current leadership of European key European powers like Germany, France, and Britain are gung-ho for that war. They're desperate for the war to continue. They're desperate to put together a credible force to go and fight that war. And so this is part of the psychosis of preparing us for that, even though nobody here is prepared for that. But one way you achieve that is exactly by destroying European economy. So because if people enjoy their jobs and they're prosperous, they're not particularly interested in going to fight wars. I think from what I gather in the relationship between the European Union and the United States, and American relation to places like Germany, France, Britain, Italy, and so forth, that the American administration favors the sovereigntist movements in Europe. And I think that this is a way for them to allow the EU and NATO to just simply collapse. And it's probably a fair bet. I think that is going to happen. The power vacuum is going to be probably filled by sovereigntist movement like AfD in France, like Assemblée Nationale in France. God knows who in Britain. I don't even see it. Nigel Farage is going to be continuity of policy. Nothing's going to change there. But then, you're going to be dealing with European countries on an individual basis. And, that at least coheres, whereas the European Union is a bundle of contradictions without an army, without a common fiscal, without an ability to enforce a common fiscal policy. They're now grasping for, Ursula von der Leyen is creating the Ministry of Truth. They're rushing digital IDs. They're rushing a CBDC. But I think it's all going to be too late and too little. So I think the European Union is going to collapse and probably take NATO with it, because right now it's the same thing. NATO and the European Union are just like, an almost complete overlap.
Yeah, and you look at Russia's actions over the last several months since the start of Trump's second term, and they haven't really let up on Ukraine. It's as if they knew that not to fall for it. It's as if they thought that this was a trap the entire time to kind of loosen the grip. So much so to enable Ukraine and the Europeans to get their footing back.
Yeah, no, it's exactly the opposite. Russia is pressing harder and moving faster. I think, they're gaining a couple of villages or towns on a daily basis, 10 to 20 square kilometers every day. And Ukrainian defenses are close to collapse. And then past a certain point, there are, from the demarcation lines to the Dnieper River, there's no defenses, there's no resistance. Ukrainians are trying hastily to create them and dig up the trenches and build reinforcement. But it's, the bulk of their military power has been destroyed. They barely have any air force left. They barely have any air defense left. They are forced to pretty much kidnap people off the street to fill up the trenches and to put people in defensive positions. And these people have no will to fight. They are not well trained. They try to surrender at the first possible opportunity. And so this is a war that has been lost. At this stage, it's come down to Russians mopping up the infantry along the demarcation lines.
So did you hear about this announcement by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth talking about this super high-level meeting coming up next week or this coming week, where they're anticipating having every single high-level general, lieutenant, every high-level official in the military will be in attendance for that meeting. And one of the people invited to that meeting said that they've been covering the Department of Defense for about 30 years now, and they've never seen anything like this. And they said, quote unquote, it feels like we're about to go to war. I mean, what do you make of that?
I don't know. I think I just saw this maybe minutes before you and I came online. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to make of it, but I would expect that it has more to do with securing the internal order of the United States. Viktor Orban has done something like this. I don't remember exactly when. It's got to be like 2 or 3 years ago, because he was worried that he might be overthrown. And so he had to conduct a purge of his military. I think he sacked something like 200 generals or something quite radical. And I think that this might be something along those lines. You wouldn't have to do that if you were going to war. You would just go to war. I don't see the necessity of doing such an unprecedented gathering. I think it's more to maybe prepare and warn about possible, I don't know, color revolutions, uprisings, coups. I don't know what exactly, but you notice Trump is taking on the big pharma. Trump is taking on George Soros and his son Alex Soros. I think that, well, Trump did say at some point that he wanted to cut the defense spending by half. So that put the military-industrial complex on alert. They're not going to be happy about this. So I guess you have to prepare the grounds for that. You have to inform your military about the risks and the dangers of things moving forward. I don't know. That's my guess. I don't know that we'll even know after the meeting exactly what is. Well, we'll probably know because somebody's going to leak it. But from the press releases and public statements, it's not going to be clear.
Understood. Well, Alex, I know we don't have you for long, and I want to be respectful for your time, but that's all I have on my end. Is there anything else you'd like to bring up before we sign off here?
Yes, actually, I thought I'd mention this because it's kind of come back to my attention. About 4 years ago, I published an article and a video about the company called Theranos. I don't know if people will remember this, but at some point it was like a big thing, and the CEO and founder was this young blonde chick named Elizabeth Holmes, and she was celebrated as the youngest self-made billionaire, the next Steve Jobs of the Silicon Valley, blah 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 blah. At the time, it was very relevant. So this was in 2021 because it had to do with the pandemic. But the reason it came back to my attention is because one of the major backers of Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes's mentor was Oracle's Larry Ellison. And what I just learned, I didn't realize this before, after the Charlie Kirk assassination, is that Larry Ellison is a part of this cabal of billionaires in the United States who are loyal to Israel, who are arch-Zionist, and have this tight, friendly relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. And so, first of all, it's a discovery that all these things are connected. It's always the same people in all these. The pandemic, Palestine, Israel. Larry Ellison was also in one recent panel. He was talking about how this whole big tech control matrix is going to keep people on their best behavior. You say something bad, we debank you, we cut your money, whatever, I don't know. But this dystopian system of control. So obviously he's involved in building that. Now he's buying up TikTok, and he's buying up CBS News for his son, and on and on and on and on. But the main reason why this story is important, that is the story of Theranos, is because it was a massively important venture. Its board of directors had Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, General Mad Dog Mattis, Sam Nunn, who was the chair of the Armed Services Committee at the Senate. That the whole board of directors were people from the deep state, from the swamp, intelligence, military, security state people. Except that the whole thing was a fraud from start to finish, from day one, and they all knew it. The reason why I think this is so relevant is because there was a moment in time, well, not moment in time, Theranos went on for 12 years. They were made to look invincible. They were, it looked like the whole thing was unassailable, but it came crashing down because a small handful of insiders, the Theranos employees, and one outside consultant and one Wall Street Journal journalist, they wouldn't let the story go. They wouldn't shut up, even though they were heavily intimidated and threatened and pursued, to the point that one of them couldn't take it and committed suicide. But nevertheless, this small group of seemingly powerless people, by continuing to speak out, by continuing to tell the truth and refusing to be intimidated, brought the whole thing down. It came crashing down to nothing, from a valuation of $9 billion to zero. And so it's an important lesson to keep in mind, because now we're, again, at some kind of a dark moment. They assassinated Charlie Kirk. They're trying to destroy or co-opt his movement. And it's important to remember that, however powerful these people may seem, Zionist billionaires, Netanyahu, they control the White House. They, Trump is afraid for his life, blah, blah, blah. We're doomed. We're not doomed. Thanks to the people like, Tucker Carlson and Max Blumenthal and another handful of people who are out there speaking the truth and refusing to shut up, brings these kinds of enterprises down. And so I will have to repost this on my Substack again, because I think it's a valuable lesson to keep in mind for, so that people understand that, we're not doomed, and we're actually in a pretty good shape.
Yeah, it's an interesting story with Theranos, because I had very vague memories of it, but you just rejiggered a lot of what I had forgotten, because it had gotten lost in the dustbin of history, and it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. It collapsed in 2015, so 10 years.
Yeah.
But it was, and at the time I was working in hedge funds, and I kind of paid attention to it because it was one of those companies that hedge fund managers talked about, and it was all over Bloomberg News, and it was all over the CBS News and CNBC and MSNBC, and so you couldn't not know about it. But two things grabbed my attention. First, the board of directors. I thought, there's no way that this is what they say that it is. Like, how did you get Henry Kissinger and George Shultz on your board of directors? How did you do that? I don't understand. There's got to be an explanation. And then came the pandemic. And then I had the aha moment. This whole thing was being prepared as an information weapon against all of us, against humanity. This is why it was so important. And there was Larry Ellison as one of the biggest investors in Theranos, as a benevolent mentor to the young, clueless moron Elizabeth Holmes. It all came crashing down. George Shultz, Henry Kissinger, Larry Ellison, Rupert Murdoch, all of these people were in on it. It crashed to the ground, to zero. And so, all it was personal integrity, courage, and will to speak the truth. Not by everybody, but just a small, I think it's total of 5 people that brought that house of cards down.
Amazing.
Yeah, truly amazing.
Well, Alex, this has been phenomenal as always. I appreciate your time. Where can people find you if they want to see more of your work?
Well, one place where I publish is you have kindly put it under my name here. So that's my daily market newsletters for traders and investors, which communicates trading signals for a group of 18 or 19 global markets. commentary is always completely free of charge. And then I have another Substack, personal Substack, where I publish a bit less frequently, which is called Alex Krainer Substack. And I'm also active on X. My handle is @NakedHedgy.
All right. We will have the links to all that down below. So check it out, guys. And if you got value out of this podcast, drop us a like and comment, "Go, Alex, go," in the comment section. If you agreed or disagreed, that's perfectly fine. But let me know why you agreed or why you disagreed. I do, in fact, read every single comment. I can't reply to all of them, but I do read them. And then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode. And by liking, subscribing, commenting, doing all the YouTube stuff, you help in pushing this video and this channel in the algorithm. So it may not seem like much, but a little bit goes a long way, and it's free. But if you'd like to support us monetarily as well, you can check me out on Substack too. It's capitalcosm.substack.com to get all of my interviews early, ad-free, and uncensored, especially for the ones that warrant it. And yeah, you get all of my stuff, and you get to ask my guests questions and recommend me guests down the line. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you later. Bye.
Take care.